The snow had been falling for 3 hours, but the truck stop on the edge of Highway 17 was still half empty. Engines idled, doors opened and closed, and nobody paid any attention to the teenage girl sitting on the concrete barrier near the fuel pumps, her coat too thin for February in northern Ontario, her eyes fixed on the road like she was waiting for something that wasn't coming back. She wasn't crying. She wasn't calling for help. She was just sitting there, completely still, in the way that people sit when they've already done their crying and have nothing left but the waiting. When Callum Donahue stepped out of his black Navigator at 11:47 at night, he almost walked right past her. He had a meeting in Sudbury at 7 in the morning and a phone full of messages he hadn't answered since Tuesday. He had enough problems of his own. But something about the way she didn't move made him stop. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the on-ramp to the highway. "You waiting on somebody?" he asked. She turned then, maybe 17, maybe younger. Dark circles under eyes that were too old for her face. A duffel bag between her feet with a tear along the zipper that someone had tried to tape shut. "My brother was supposed to come back," she said. "He said 20 minutes. That was this morning." Callum stood there for a second and didn't say anything. 20 minutes. That was this morning. He'd heard a lot of things in his life that landed wrong. That one hit different. "How long have you been out here?" She looked at the sky like she was calculating. "Since 9 in the morning." It was nearly midnight. He pulled his phone out and checked the temperature. -14 with the wind. He didn't call anyone. He didn't ask her to move along. He just said, "Come inside. Get something warm." She looked at him the way people look at strangers who offer things. That split second where you weigh the danger of trusting against the danger of not. Then she picked up her duffel bag and followed him in. Before we go any further, if you're watching this on Sadie's Romance Library, hit subscribe and drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. We've got listeners from all over Canada and beyond, and every comment reminds us that these stories reach someone who needs them. Now let's get back to Callum and the girl he almost walked past on the coldest night of the year. His name was Callum Donahue, 41 years old. The kind of man who walked through a room and made other men shift in their seats without quite knowing why. Broad shoulders, dark coat, a face that had learned not to show much of anything over the years. He'd grown up in Hamilton, left at 20, with nothing but a name people in certain circles recognized, and an appetite for surviving in places that ate the weak. By 30, he'd built something. By 40, he was managing it. What that something was depended on who you asked. His legitimate businesses stretched across southern Ontario: logistics, property, 2 restaurant groups, a security firm. The other side of the ledger was the part nobody discussed in writing. He ordered coffee and a grilled cheese and pushed it toward the girl without making a production of it. "You don't have to," she started. "I ordered too much," he said. He hadn't. She ate like she was trying not to look hungry and failing. He watched the parking lot and said nothing until she was done. "What's your name?" "Siege." She said it carefully, like she'd learned to be thoughtful about what she gave to strangers. "Siege what?" A pause. "Siege Kowalski." "Where are you from, Siege Kowalski?" "Timmins, originally. We moved around." She looked at her hands. "My brother Caden and me. We move around a lot. How old are you?" 16. He nodded like that answered something, when really it just made every worse. "Your brother, he have a reason to leave you here? Or is this something else?" She looked out the window at the pumps, the snow coming down harder now, the highway beyond it disappearing into white. "He said it was work. He gets calls sometimes and he has to go. He always comes back." She stopped. He always came back before. Callum felt something settle in his gut that he didn't like. He'd spent enough years around people who disappeared on short notice to know what that usually meant. "What kind of work does your brother do?" The girl's eyes came back to him. Careful again. "Measuring. Transportation," she said, in a voice that meant she knew it was more than that and had learned not to say so. Callum pulled out his phone and called a number he'd had memorized for 15 years. It rang 3 times. "Callum, it's almost midnight. I know what time it is, Reardon. I need you to run a name for me. Caden Kowalski, probably mid-20s, Timmins area, works transportation. Find me whatever you can inside the hour." "What's this about?" "Just run it." He hung up and looked at Sage. She was watching him with those careful eyes, trying to figure out what kind of person made phone calls like that, and still bought a stranger a grilled cheese. "Are you someone I should be worried about?" she asked. It was such a direct question that he almost smiled. "Probably," he said, "but not tonight." She seemed to accept that. Outside, a transport truck pulled in, headlights sweeping across the windows. Both of them watched it without meaning to. "Sage," he said after a moment, "when your brother got that call, did he seem scared?" She looked down at her duffel bag, the tape on the zipper. "He seemed like he was trying not to seem scared," she said. "He told me to stay by the door where the lights were. Told me not to talk to anyone." She paused. "He gave me his phone charger before he left. He never gives me his phone charger." Callum let that sit for a second. A man who hands off his charger before a 20-minute errand isn't planning on 20 minutes. He made another call. Different number. Answered on the first ring. "Danny. Traffic cameras on 17 northbound, Barlow's truck stop, today between 8 a.m. and noon. I'm looking for a car that came in with 2 passengers and left with 1. "What are we talking about here, Callum?" "I'm talking about a 16-year-old kid left alone in -14. There was a pause on the line. Then, "Give me 30. 22 minutes later, his phone buzzed. 3 images. The first showed a gray Civic pulling into the lot just after 9 in the morning. The second showed a young man and a teenage girl getting out. The third showed the young man getting back in alone, backing out, pulling toward the exit. But in the background of that third image, barely visible, tucked between 2 transports near the back of the lot, was a black SUV, no plates visible. Windows too dark to see through, parked in exactly the position someone would choose if they wanted to watch without being watched." Callum stared at the image for a long time. Caden Kowalski hadn't driven away. He'd been driven. Callum set the phone face down on the table and looked at Sage. "Your brother," he said carefully. "Did he ever mention a name? Someone from work he talked about more than others?" She twisted the strap of the duffel bag. "There was a guy he called the broker. He never said a real name, just the broker. He said this man got him the job in the first place. Said he owed him." She paused. Caden always said, owing the broker was the same as owing the highway. You could never pay it off. Callum's jaw tightened. The broker. He knew that name. Half the criminal infrastructure between Toronto and the Manitoba border knew that name. Alexei Brun never used his real name in conversation, never appeared in the same city twice in the same month. The kind of man who built supply chains out of desperate people and called it business. If Caden Kowalski had been running packages for Alexei Brun, then leaving his sister at a truck stop in the middle of February wasn't a failure of responsibility. It was the only responsible thing he could have done. His phone buzzed. "Riordan, you're not going to like this. Tell me anyway. Caden Kowalski, 23, no fixed address past 18 months. Priors are minor. 1 possession charge, stayed. But he's been flagged in 2 RCMP intelligence reports in the past year. He's a runner for a distribution network. Small packages, high value, paid in cash. Network traces back to the broker." Silence. "Then yeah, how did you know?" "Because the sister's sitting across from me at a truck stop on 17 and the brother left 6 hours ago for a 20-minute phone call." Callum looked at Sage. She was watching him the way animals watch things they can't quite decide about. "Riordan, I need you to find Caden Kowalski. Check hospitals, check OPP incident reports, check anywhere someone would be taken if they needed to be kept quiet for a while. Callum, are you getting involved in something?" "Find the kid." He ended the call and slid the phone into his coat pocket and looked at Sage Kowalski, who had been alone in the cold for 14 hours with a broken duffel bag, and the kind of patience that only comes from a life of waiting for people to come back. "Sage," he said, "I need to be straight with you." She straightened slightly. "Okay, your brother didn't just leave, someone took him, or he went to meet someone he was afraid of and couldn't take you with him. Either way, this stops being a simple wait-and-see situation." She was quiet for a moment. Her hands stayed flat on the table. "Is he dead?" The question was steady, braced for the answer rather than afraid of it. "I don't know," Callum said, "but I'm going to find out." She looked at him then, really looked at him, the way you look at someone when you're deciding whether to bet everything on them. "Why?" she said. You don't know us. Callum thought about that, about what kind of answer was honest without being too much. Because somebody should have stopped for you 12 hours ago, he said, and nobody did. She nodded once, slow, like she was filing that away. Then she reached into the duffel bag and pulled out a photograph, creased, taken on a phone, and printed at a pharmacy from the look of it. A young man, maybe 23, dark-haired, grinning at the camera in front of what looked like a waterfront, his arm around a much younger Sage, both of them squinting into the sun. That's him, she said, in case you need to know what he looks like. Callum took the photograph. We need to go. Where? Somewhere that isn't a truck stop on a highway where someone already came looking. She picked up her bag without being told twice. Callum left 2 20s on the table and pushed his untouched coffee aside. Outside, the snow had thickened. He scanned the lot before they walked to the Navigator. Old habit. The kind that had kept him alive through things he didn't talk about at dinner tables. He opened the passenger side door. She got in. He walked around to the driver's side and started the engine and pulled out of the lot heading south. They drove in silence for a while. Sage watched the highway blur past. Callum checked the mirrors every 30 seconds. His phone buzzed. Text from Riordan. Coordinates and a single line. OP found a gray Civic on a side road off Cartier. Registered to Caden Kowalski. Vehicle empty, scenes clean. Too clean. Callum read it twice, then put the phone in his cup holder. Saj, she turned, your brother gave you that bag before he left this morning, not just the charger. The bag. She nodded slowly. He handed it to me when we got out of the car. Said hold on to it. He ever have you hold on to it before? Long pause. No. I need you to open the front pocket. She unzipped the tape-patched main compartment and then found the smaller front zipper. Inside, tucked under a tube of lip balm and a folded bus schedule, was a small envelope, unsealed. Inside the envelope was a USB drive and a handwritten note on the back of a gas station receipt. She read it first. Her face changed. What does it say? She held it out to him. He took it at a red light, 3 lines. Caden's handwriting, tight and fast like it had been written quickly. If you're reading this with someone you trust, let them have the drive. It's everything. Tell them the broker's real name is on it. They'll know what to do. Callum held the note and felt the weight of what was actually happening settle over the car like weather. Caden Kowalski hadn't just been running packages. He'd been keeping records. Which meant the broker knew it. Which meant that gray Civic on the side road off Cartier wasn't abandoned. It was staged. He handed the note back to Sage and held out his hand. She put the drive in it. His phone rang. Unknown number. Donahue. The voice on the other end was calm the way expensive things are calm, controlled, deliberate, costing something. Mr. Donahue, I understand you've been making inquiries about a young man named Kowalski. Callum kept his voice level. Who is this? Someone with a significant interest in how the next few hours unfold. The girl is a loose end. The drive she's carrying is a liability. I'm calling to offer you an exit from a situation that doesn't involve you. Callum glanced at Sage. She was watching him, reading his face. She's 16, he said. She's the sister of a man who made very poor choices. That makes her collateral, not a concern. She's a concern to me. A pause. The kind that precedes recalculation. You have a reputation for pragmatism, Mr. Donahue. Don't let sentimentality compromise that. Callum looked at Saj Kowalski, sitting in his passenger seat in a coat too thin for February, holding a duffel bag her brother had handed off like a goodbye. A girl who'd sat on a concrete barrier for 14 hours in the dark because she trusted that someone would come back. Here's what's going to happen, he said, and his voice dropped to something quiet that cost more than volume. You're going to stop looking for the girl. You're going to pull your people off whatever road they're on. And if I see one vehicle I don't recognize in my mirrors before this is over, I will make sure that drive reaches every law enforcement contact I have between here and Ottawa, and I will make sure your name is the first thing they read. Silence. You're making an enemy, Donahue. I've had worse. He hung up and immediately called his sister. She answered on the second ring. Nadia, I need your place in Parry Sound. Clean entry, no record of who's there. Can you do it? Callum, what have you walked into? I'll explain when we get there. Just make it ready. He ended the call and turned east. Sage was watching him. The bad people called, she said. It wasn't a question. Yeah, are you scared? He thought about lying and didn't. Not for myself. She looked out the windshield at the highway stretching into the dark. My brother used to say that fear means you have something worth protecting. She paused. He said it right before he started making worse and worse choices. Your brother sounds like a complicated person. He's the only person I have, she said simply. And then she turned and looked out the window and didn't say anything else for a very long time. The drive to Parry Sound took 2.5 hours. Sage slept for most of it, curled into Callum's coat that she'd pulled from the back seat without asking. He didn't mind. He drove and thought and checked his mirrors and let her sleep. Nadia's place was off a logging road that didn't appear on most maps. A cottage that had been in the family since before Callum could remember, reinforced by renovations he'd paid for over the years with cash and no receipts. One road in, one road out, monitored by people who didn't ask questions. Nadia met them at the door, 45. Sharp eyes, the kind of calm that came from decades of being the person everyone else called in a crisis. She took one look at Sage and handed her a blanket and pointed her toward the couch without saying a word. Then she pulled Callum into the kitchen. Tell me. He laid it out. The truck stop, the girl, the brother, the drive, the call from Alexei Brun's people, though they'd been careful not to say his name. Nadia listened without interrupting. When he was done, she said, the drive. He put it on the counter. If it has what the brother said it has, then it changes the shape of a federal investigation, Callum said. RCMP has been building something against the broker for 2 years. Riordan told me that last spring. They flipped 2 runners but couldn't get close enough to the financial side. This, he looked at the drive, this could be the financial side. Nadia picked it up, which means Caden Kowalski spent the past God knows how long documenting everything from the inside, while running packages and pretending he was just another low-level carrier. Brave or stupid. Maybe both. They looked at each other across the kitchen counter. The girl doesn't know what her brother actually did, Callum said. She might suspect, she suspects. She doesn't know. He picked up the drive. I need to find Caden. If he's alive, the only leverage he has is the drive, which means whoever has him is waiting to see if it surfaces. And if it surfaces here, then we set the terms. Nadia shook her head slowly. Callum, I know. You know that walking this into federal territory means, I know what it means. She looked at him for a long moment, then looked toward the door where Sage was sitting on the couch in a borrowed blanket, the duffel bag between her feet like she still wasn't ready to put it down. She trusted you, Nadia said quietly. I know. Don't break that. He didn't answer because he didn't break promises he made to himself, and this had already become one. His phone buzzed. Riordan. He answered before the second ring. I found something. There's an industrial property outside Brit. Storage facility, been empty on paper for 3 years, but the hydro account shows consistent draw. OPP flagged it 6 months ago in a separate file, and then the flag disappeared, quietly. Callum felt something sharpen in his chest. Someone cleaned the flag, someone with access and motivation, the kind of motivation you get when a federal investigation is getting inconveniently close. How long to put a team on the property? Callum, how long, Riordan? A pause. 3 hours if I call in a favor I was saving. Call it in. He ended the call and stood at the kitchen window looking at the snow and the dark beyond it. Then he went to the couch and sat down across from Sage. She looked up. I think I know where your brother is, he said. Her face didn't crumple. It went very still instead, the way faces go when hope and dread arrive at the same time, and you haven't decided yet which one to let in. Is he okay? I don't know yet, but I'm going to go find out. Take me with you. No, he's my brother, and if something goes wrong, he needs you to be somewhere safe. That's why he handed you that bag. He was buying you time. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached into the duffel bag and pulled something out. A small keychain, cheap plastic, the kind you get from a souvenir rack. A little Ontario flag, a single key attached. He kept this on his key ring since I was 8, she said. It's the key to the first apartment we ever rented that was actually ours. The building's been demolished for years. Key doesn't open anything anymore. She held it out. Take it, so you have a reason to come back and give it to him. Callum looked at the key for a long moment. Then he took it. He drove north through the pre-dawn dark. Two of Nadia's people followed at distance. Riordan had eyes on the property but wouldn't move without Callum's call. They both understood that whatever happened in the next hour had to happen carefully, in the right sequence, or the chain of custody on that drive fell apart and Alexei Brun walked free. The storage facility appeared on a county road outside Britt just as the sky began to lighten in the east. Concrete block buildings behind a chain-link fence, one light on inside the second structure. A black SUV parked near the east wall. Callum recognized the SUV. Same angle, same position as the one in the truck stop photo. He parked on the road and called Riordan. "I'm here. We've got federal authorization. Chen's team is 12 minutes out. I'm not waiting 12 minutes, Callum." He was already out of the car. What happened in the next 11 minutes was not the kind of thing that gets described in detail in polite company. Callum Donahue had not survived 20 years in the margins of the world by being hesitant, and the two men inside the facility had made the mistake of not expecting someone to walk through a locked door like it was an inconvenience rather than a barrier. They found Caden Kowalski in the back room, 23 years old, dark-haired, matching the photograph, zip-tied to a chair with the specific kind of exhaustion that comes from a day and a night of being asked the same question and giving the same answer. He looked up when the door opened. "The drive," he said immediately. "Is the drive safe? Is my sister?" "Your sister is in Parry Sound," Callum said. "She's been drinking tea and waiting for me to come back." Caden Kowalski's face did the thing faces do when something has been held taut for too long and suddenly doesn't have to be anymore. He didn't cry. He just breathed, slow and deep, like a man who'd been underwater. "She's okay," he said. "She's better than okay," Callum said. "She's the kind of 16-year-old who hands a stranger a key and tells him it's a reason to come back." The federal team arrived 7 minutes later. Agent Sarah Chen led the file. 5 years building the case against the broker, and Caden Kowalski's drive contained 43 months of financial records, transaction logs, account numbers, and a hierarchy that went far enough up to make certain people in certain offices very uncomfortable. Callum sat in his Navigator in the parking lot of that facility outside Britt and watched the sun come up over the tree line and thought about things he hadn't thought about in a long time. He stayed until the ambulance confirmed Caden was stable. Then he drove south. He handed over the key at Nadia's door. Caden Kowalski crossed the room in 4 steps and pulled his sister into a hug that neither of them seemed willing to be the first to break. Sage had both fists full of his jacket. He had his chin on top of her head. Neither of them said anything for a long time. Then Sage pulled back and looked at her brother's face. The cut above his eyebrow, the bruise along his jaw, and she reached up and put her hand on his cheek without saying a word. He covered her hand with his. Callum watched from the doorway and didn't say anything either. Some things don't need commentary. 2.5 years later, Callum Donahue stood in the back of a federal courthouse in Toronto and watched Alexei Brun receive a sentence of 22 years. Caden Kowalski testified for 3 days. Sage sat in the 3rd row for all of it. After the verdict, she found Callum in the hallway outside. She was 18 now. Something in her bearing had shifted, still careful, still watchful, but less like someone waiting for a blow, and more like someone who had learned to trust the ground under her feet. "I keep thinking about that truck stop," she said. "Yeah? I keep thinking about how many cars drove past me. All those hours before you." Callum looked at her for a moment. "I almost drove past too, but you didn't." "No." She nodded slowly. "My brother says you're the reason everything changed." Callum thought about a key that didn't open anything anymore. About a girl who handed it to a stranger and called it a reason to come back. "Your brother did the hard part," he said. "He made a choice a long time before I walked into that truck stop. He just needed someone to make sure it wasn't wasted." Sage looked down the courthouse hallway, at the light coming through the tall windows at the far end. "Caden works with a youth outreach program now," she said. "Kids who are falling into the same networks he fell into. He knows what the on-ramp looks like from the inside. I heard he's good at it." She paused. "He said the best thing he ever did was hand me that bag, that it was the only smart thing. He's right." She looked at Callum then, direct and clear, and said, "Thank you for stopping." He nodded once. Thank you for telling me his name. That photograph, it made it real. She smiled. Brief, genuine, the kind that reaches the eyes. Nadia told me you kept the key until you could give it back. I did. That's why I trusted you, she said simply. Somewhere on Highway 17, just past the Barlow's truck stop, where the snow falls heavy in February, and most cars drive straight through, without a second look, there is a concrete barrier near the fuel pumps. It doesn't look like anything, but Callum Donahue knows it for what it is. The place where one decision undid everything that would have happened if he'd kept walking. If this story made you think about the people we almost don't stop for, hit that like button and subscribe to Sadie's Romance Library. And tell us in the comments, where in Canada are you watching from tonight? Because the world is full of people driving past, and every once in a while, one of them turns around. Share this with someone who needs to remember that it only takes one.